Thank you for being here. And I have something I think is very important that I'm trying to say, and I hope I can get it across to you. And it has to do with this enormous boom in energy production, which we are experiencing right now. Right at the very time that we know we have to figure out how to get off of fossil fuel, we're discovering more and more and more of it. And how is that affecting our understanding of what's happening in the world as a whole, in the transition that we have to go through? It's a very complex situation. Do you remember back when we were running out of fossil fuel? Yeah, it wasn't so long ago that the big question was, are we going to have enough? I remember back in the 70s, and it looks like some of you might remember that far back too. You remember back when the big question was, are we going to make it to the end of the century? Are we going to have enough coal, oil, and fossil fuel to get to the year 2000? You remember that? Well, guess what? Here we are. We made it. And it's looking a lot like we may make it to the end of this century too, with enough fossil fuel to go around. And that should be very comforting to some people. Now, I used to think, and maybe you did too, that what was going to happen is that right about the time when we really had to get off of fossil fuel for climate reasons, it was going to get so scarce that the price would go up and it would get too expensive, and we would begin to buy renewable energy because it was cheaper. You remember thinking that way? Yeah. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because we now know that in proven reserves around the world, we now have at our fingertips 3 to 5 times as much fossil fuel as we need to ruin the climate. 3 to 5 times as much coal, oil, and natural gas as we need to heat the Earth's atmosphere up above the 2-degree limit and get into the early feedback loops and the threshold point of an irreversible climate chaos that could make life questionable for plants, animals, and people. It's that bad. And this situation, having this overdose of fossil fuel at our fingertips, changes what it means to be a human being. Because it means that we're going to have to figure out how to not burn, to not extract, to not sell 70 to 80% of the mineral worth that's in the soil beneath our feet. And we don't know how to do that. We're talking about trillions of dollars, hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of mineral wealth that we're going to have to not use. And that changes what it means to be a human being on this earth. We are programmed through our social DNA to maximize consumption. Now, that's programming right now, as we are right now today. I don't think this is a matter of human nature. I think it's a matter of the particulars of the society that we're living in, the time and place that we're living in. And this gets down to something that I call in my book the economic paradigm. Now, a paradigm is just a fancy academic word that means a worldview. It means a framework within which we make sense of the world, and within which we make decisions about what we're going to do in the world. And it's based on assumptions, unquestioned assumptions, unconscious assumptions. And the assumption underlying the economic paradigm is that the purpose of human life is economic growth. That's what we're here for. That's the purpose in human life. Now, you won't see people standing up in church saying that the purpose of human life is economic growth. They don't have to, because it's assumed. It's unconscious. It's there underneath the decisions we make as individuals and as a society. Now, we should admit from the very beginning that this economic paradigm has brought us unprecedented levels of prosperity. We are now living in, by far, the richest time and place in all of human history. And a lot of that is due to this kind of worldview, this kind of economic perspective. But there's one big weakness in the economic paradigm, and that is that it can't see life. When it looks at a tree, it doesn't see a living organism, it sees lumber. When it looks at a river valley, it doesn't see a complex ecosystem, it sees a drain, a sewer. When it looks at a mountaintop in Appalachia, it sees a coal mine. When it looks at a pasture or a cornfield in central Kentucky, it sees a really nice place to put a natural gas liquids pipeline. Okay, so that's the mentality within which we are operating. The economic paradigm isolates our consumption, the act of consumption, from awareness of what that consumption is doing to the natural world. But all this is going to change. What happens when we begin to see things in the world which are not in the worldview? Things like hotter days, droughts, fires in Australia, fires in the American West, more intense storm systems. Have you been seeing that recently? Melting glaciers, melting ice caps. Did you know that only half of the Arctic ice cap is left now? So when we start seeing things like this that don't fit into the prevailing worldview, we can do one of two things. Either we can deny that they exist, because after all, if they're not in the worldview, they're not in the world, right? Or we can build a new worldview. We can build a new paradigm. We can build a much larger understanding of our place in the world that includes the forests, includes the oceans, includes the land and the weather. And this is what I call the ecologic paradigm. I think you all know what I'm talking about here. It's a much larger picture. It's a much bigger understanding of the meaning of human life on Earth. But it includes the economy. We're not talking about something that's going to exist in opposition to the economy. The economy is part of it. We will always need money. We will always need jobs. We will always need to extract from the earth. We will always have this appetite for consumption. And that will be part of the picture. But it won't take up the whole screen. There'll be a much bigger picture that it will be part of. I'm talking about putting the economy inside of the ecology where it belongs. So where the economic paradigm would say that it's the proper role of society to do whatever it has to do to meet consumer demand, the ecologic paradigm says that it's the proper role of society to shape consumer demand to fit the carrying capacity of the earth. So a paradigm shift is not a change in what we're looking at. It's a change in where we're looking from. It's a change in us. It's a change in being. It's a revolution in human consciousness. And that's why we're all here today. That's why energy is a topic at the Festival of Faiths. Because we're not just talking here about the economy or engineering or politics or some social activism of some sort here. We're talking about something much bigger. We're talking about reevaluating the meaning of our presence on this earth, and in particular, in relation to non-human life. That's the difference right now. And as this movement develops and grows, we should know from the very beginning that this movement is unlike any other movement which have ever existed before, because the climate crisis is the first crisis in human history that is of truly planetary scale. It doesn't involve one group of people against another group of people, one nation against another nation, one class against another class. This involves the wholeness of humanity in relation to the plants and the animals within a single atmosphere. And what that means is that we can have no enemies. There are no enemies of this movement. And I have to say that now because it's natural for any social movement, any political campaign, any revolution to try to find a common enemy, somebody we can blame it all on, somebody we can point to and all hate together. That's a very powerful tool that many organizations have used in the past. But we do not have the luxury of that tool. Even the coal companies, even the oil companies, even the people building the Keystone XL Pipeline, the people building the Bluegrass Pipeline, the people blowing up mountains in eastern Kentucky, the people fracking the bedrock in Pennsylvania and Ohio. These are not bad people. There's no evil here. In fact, these people are doing what we want them to do, because they're filling the demand that we are creating by our continued use of fossil fuel. They only sell what we buy. So there's no us and them, there's only us here. We can't even blame the fuel itself, because we like to have our homes heated in the wintertime. We like to have lights. We like computers and entertainment. We like transportation. I drove here this morning. Some of you may have driven also. Even food. Fossil fuel even brings us food. Tractor fuel, refrigerated trucks, refrigerated railroad cars. Nitrogen fertilizer, which is the basis of the green revolution that's feeding 7 billion people on this planet right now. Nitrogen fertilizer is based on natural gas. So we can't even eat without fossil fuel. So we should be thankful for it. We should be grateful for it. The mistake is not in seeing the utility of fossil fuel. The mistake is in seeing the permanence of fossil fuel. This is a transient fuel. This is just a stage we're going through. We haven't had fossil fuel for very long, and we're not going to have it for much longer. We're just passing through this stage. This is not the culmination of human history. We've got to keep moving on to the next stage. Now, fossil fuels will bring us from the horse and buggy days up through the present and deliver us into the renewable energy society, if we keep moving. So the vision then, the vision is of the wholeness of humanity in relation to the natural world, in motion through this particular period in our development. But in conclusion, I would remind you that not everybody will see the vision. Not everybody will understand what we're talking about. And we will never convince many people of what we're talking about. So this is going to be a fight, a peaceful fight, but it's going to be a fight nonetheless. And we are going to have to use force, not violence, but force, truth force, what Mahatma Gandhi called satyagraha, the power of truth. But we have to be very careful with our use of the power of truth, because truth's a pretty powerful thing. It's probably the most powerful thing that we have available to us. But we don't own truth. We don't have any exclusive access to truth that other people don't have. So we have to be careful how we use it. And as we create this movement, we have to draw attention not to ourselves, but past ourselves, to the real world. That's where the truth resides, in what is actually happening in the real world. Truth is something that comes out in time. It's something that we don't often recognize unless we're looking in retrospective back into something that has always happened. Truth comes out in time. But our problem right now is we don't have a lot of time. So we have to do things to help bring that truth up to the surface before it's too late. If there is truth in our vision, it will not be in what we think. It will be in what everybody, everywhere, will be able to see in time through their own eyes. Thank you very much.